All right, today we're going to talk about Chapter 13. We're down to the last lap, the last set of chapters for the last exam. This to me is a particularly interesting chapter. It's starting to enter the realm of my research area, which is decision making, basically. So we're going to talk in this chapter about conflict and peacemaking. Obviously, conflicts exist, and we need to resolve those conflicts without beating the crap out of each other, right? So, how to resolve conflicts as well. And it's going to be a very interesting notion. A conflict is a perceived incompatibility of actions or goals. That is to say, there is a perception that what we want doesn't work together. Peace, a condition marked by low levels of hostility and aggression and by mutually beneficial relationships. Mutually beneficial. We've already sort of seen a little tit for tat earlier, and we find that peaceful relations are often characterized by tit for tat, mutually beneficial relationships. Okay? So, first thing I want to talk about is today, in this material, I'm going to talk about two different types of social traps which tend to lead to conflicts. Now, I'm going to describe them in ways that seem a little bit trivial, but then I promise you I will give you the insight to help you realize how big they actually are, how big of a deal they are. So a social trap, by definition, is a situation in which the conflicting parties, by each rationally pursuing their own self-interest, become caught in mutually destructive behavior. And it's, by the way, it's in the definition because it can involve individuals or governments or all kinds of different stuff. Okay, we're going to talk about two in particular: the prisoner's dilemma and tragedy of the commons. Though we'll lay these out. These two types of dilemmas are descriptive of many types of dilemmas that go on, or many situations. But before I move in, I want you to I want to lay this out. This is perhaps the simplest way to describe conflict. Okay, the problem is that there's this thing in this world called a zero-sum game. Okay, a zero-sum game is a game such as poker with your buddies, and if John loses $10, then Bill must win $10. I mean, the table must come away at zero, right? That's a zero-sum game. All wins must be balanced out by losses. In a non-zero-sum game, it doesn't have to come to zero. In fact, it could come to zero, it could come to negative, it could come to positive, okay? It is possible that everybody wins, everybody loses. It depends on how you do the scenario. So we're going to talk about this notion of social cooperation and how with social cooperation you can get a win-win-win-win situation where everybody wins. But unfortunately what happens is too many people, they approach social situations as zero-sum games, that there must be a winner and there must be a loser, and nobody wants to be a loser. Take that to the bank. So we find that in many scenarios where it's a non-zero-sum game, people perceive it as though it's a zero-sum game and somebody must win and somebody must lose. All right, so let's kind of talk about conflicts and where they come from. So let's talk about traps. I'm putting this in context. It's the collective traps, the last one on that list, which is going to be the most interesting. These first four are sort of just to lead us to the fifth one, really. I mean, the first four are interesting. Don't get me wrong, they're interesting. But they really are there for the sole purpose of leading us to the fifth one. A trap or a sin of commission occurs when we take potentially harmful courses of action, when we do things that are harmful. A counter trap is when we fail to do things that would be good for us. Okay? So let me kind of define them. Time delay traps, right? Momentary gratification clashes with long-term consequences. This is very similar to self-control problems. The self-control problem, which is stated as there's two choices at any given moment. I mean, to simplify it, we can choose to do two things: easy things and hard things. Okay, smoke or not smoke or something. Okay. The problem is the thing that is easy at the moment is the thing that's probably not good for us in the long run, hence time delay. So we find that when we make choices, the choices have both immediate consequences and delayed consequences. And when we make choices in which the immediate consequences feel good, let's say, for example, smoking, chances are the long-term consequences are bad. Okay? Or a counter trap, we avoid things at the moment because they're unpleasant, even though they're better in the long run, such as going to the gym to exercise. Okay? Because we see this little girl here on this treadmill, and we all know that doing this kind of stuff is good for us, but it doesn't feel good at the moment. Okay? And so just like the trap of smoking is, we fall, whatever. Leave it alone. Ignorance traps are basically traps that occur when we don't really understand the consequences of behavior. I would argue that many, this is an element of all conflicts, but you know, we don't know what the long-term consequences of our decisions are. Here, I like this trap. We choose to do something pleasant at the moment without knowing it is bad for us in the long run, and I put marriage on there. You're gonna love that, right? Or we avoid doing things that are unpleasant at the moment because we don't really understand that they're good for us in the long run. So we see that when vaccines were first invented, people were like, "You're gonna do what now? You're gonna inject me with what kind of bug?" No, I don't think so. And so people avoided vaccines like the plague at first because they didn't understand the long-term consequences. An investment trap occurs when prior expenses lead us to make a choice we wouldn't normally do. Like we choose to continue pursuing something we know is wrong because we've already invested so much in it. And this one always reminds me of my mother. She was a writer for a long time, and she had invested herself in Microsoft. No, not Microsoft. WordPerfect. Now, along came Microsoft Word. It was so much better. And I tried to convince her, "Here, Mom, just learn to do this. It would be so much better." And she says, "No way. There's no way because I have invested so many years in WordPerfect." And up until the day she retired from writing, she kept using this antiquated program just because she was familiar with it, all right? Because she didn't want to put in the effort to move forward to the next one. A counter trap. We avoid starting a new thing we realize is much better because we haven't... Oh, I guess that's what I just described. There's your mom. And then we continue. That's like bad investing. Alright. Whatever. Going on. Deterioration traps. These are kind of funky. They occur when initially rewarding courses of action become less reinforcing with time. Reinforcers do, in fact, change with time. Let's say, for example, a drug user, a person that starts to use drugs, what we find is that you ask a heroin addict about it, and they'll say they're always chasing their first high. You know, that no high is ever as good as the first one, and they continue to use heroin even though they know it's bad for them and everything else because they're chasing that first high, and they keep doing it even though it's not any good anymore. A counter trap. We fail to begin doing something which is now good because it used to be bad. And it's really hard to come up with an example on a counter trap, so I won't even try. I had one there. It was kind of funky, but whatever. Like I said, the point of these initial 4 traps is really to come down to the collective trap, because this is a social psychology class, right? Those other traps are traps that, I mean, you take a look. You look at a deterioration trap. Generally speaking, this is something you make bad choices, you fall into it. 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 Get it? Your behavior, your consequence. Your behavior, your consequence. Your behavior, your consequence. Your behavior, your consequence. Your behavior, other people get the consequence. This is social psychology class. All of a sudden, in collective trap, our behaviors affect other people. Okay, you know they do. The pursuit of individual self-interest results in adverse consequences for the collective. So the individual saying, "I'm going to get the best," everybody else suffers. We perform actions beneficial to our own interest even though they have negative consequences for the collective. You know how pissed I am. I swear to God. They've got the road put up there. It's 2 lanes here, and I mean, I'm doing this every morning now. I'm driving out, and every morning this is happening, and I'm swearing every time. And they've got it worked out so that the left lane goes up and becomes a left lane only lane, and the right lane goes up and then splits into a straight lane and a right turn lane. And so, of course, the right lane is much, much, much longer because it's going to be two different directions going out instead of just the one. And so then what happens is, of course, what people do is they drive as far as they think they can get away with in the left lane and then try to cut over as fast. And it happens every freaking morning. Every morning it happens. Alright, you know what? They even tried to break this they put a solid line right down the middle of the road. And y'all know the rule of the road. Solid line equals you're not allowed to cross it. Well, this morning, I swear to God, I watched a cop pull that bullshit on me, alright? Drove in that left lane as far as he could, and then crossed that solid line and just cheated. I mean, it's both... Ugh. I get so frustrated because I'm just a sucker, and we'll talk about the suckers payout in a little while. I'm the sucker that sits in the right lane where I'm supposed to be, waiting for my turn. A counter trap. Oh, whew, sorry, I had to get that off my chest. We fail to do things which are difficult for us, even though the consequences for the collective are negative. And here I've got a little picture of the dog walking the dog, and who wants to pick up their dog's squishy poop, right? I don't want to pick up those squishy poop, though it's in everybody's best interest to have a poop-free park. Do you want to pick up your poop? In fact, I'm going to kind of give us a little hint out here. You know what would be the ideal situation for me? Remember, pursuing my own individual self-interest, the best outcome for me is this. I don't pick up my dog's poop, but everybody else does. We have a fairly clean park, just a couple of poopies in there somewhere, and I don't have to deal with it. Wouldn't that be awesome? Let's look at the absolute worst scenario in this outcome. I pick up my dog's poop, but nobody else does. That's called the sucker's payout, okay? So we're going to talk about these in the prisoner's dilemma in a second here, but I wanted to lay these out in terms of traps first. Now we're going to move into how these collective traps might be talked about in social psychology. In the prisoner's dilemma, let me try to describe the prisoner's dilemma. This is a game. Came out of game theory, by the way. It actually came out of the Rand Corporation, which was developed as a think tank during the Cold War to help try to figure out ways to defuse the Cold War. Okay, and so imagine this scenario. You have two prisoners, prisoner A and prisoner B, and let me come up with a believable scenario. All right, so now I got it. So now they okay. So they're pulled over in their car, and the trunk of their car is filled with all kinds of stolen goods. Okay, and so they take the two people and they bring them into the police station, and they put them into separate rooms. This is key. Now, in a prisoner's dilemma, no talking to each other. So they put them into two separate rooms, and these lawyers, or these cops most likely, get in there, and they basically say the same thing to both people, okay, and separate from each other. So I'll just explain what prisoner A hears. They say, hey, prisoner A, here's the deal. We found you with all that stuff in your car, all right? We've got the evidence to put you up for receiving stolen goods. All right, you're gonna, that's jail time right there. Receiving stolen goods is jail time. But you know what? We don't know that you stole it. We have no idea if you stole it, okay? But here's the deal. We just want somebody, we really need to have a conviction here. So what we want is, because the store really wants to get a conviction so that they can look good on their tough on crime. So here's the deal. If you confess to this crime and say that you and your buddy, prisoner A, if you confess, B, your buddy is B, if you confess, here's the deal. We'll go easy on you if you confess, okay? And the guy's like, really? You'll go easy on me? Goes, yeah, we'll go easy on you. Okay, tell me what happens. He goes, okay, if you confess and your buddy doesn't say anything, your buddy goes to jail for 10 years for committing this crime, and you can go away scot-free. That's what we'll let you get away with, okay? So you'll get 0 years in jail, all right? So this prisoner goes, really? That sounds good. But what if my buddy doesn't confess? Well, if your buddy doesn't confess, then, well, oh boy, how do I describe this? I can't, it's confusing even to me. I mean, it's easy, but it's confusing. But it goes like this. Prisoner A, let's say the top two boxes is prisoner A. If The problem is prisoner A can't control what prisoner B is going to do. Okay? And so prisoner A is like, if you confess and your buddy confesses, you both get 5 years. If your buddy confesses and you don't confess, you get 10 years. So he's like, okay, if my friend confesses, then I get 5 years or 10 years, depending on my behavior. Well, duh. I think I'm going with the 5 years, right? Okay, what if my buddy doesn't confess? Okay, you get either 0 years or 1 year if your buddy doesn't confess. Really? 0 beats 1. So in both scenarios, I can't control what prisoner B is going to do. I can't control it. I don't know, okay? But I do know that if my buddy confesses, my confessing will get me less jail time than not confessing. And if he doesn't confess, my confessing gets me less jail time than not confessing. Now, if both guys would just shut up and keep their mouths closed, they could both get 1 year in jail and just be done with it, right? But both of them are pursuing their own selfish best interest, okay? Remember, there's no evidence that they actually committed this crime. They just have stolen goods in their car. But both of them pursuing their own selfish best interest. Remember, that's the definition of the what did we call this trap? The collective trap, duh. That's the very definition of the trap, right? Everybody's pursuing their own selfish best interest. So this guy's like, well, I can get less jail time if I confess. And so this guy is basically pursuing one of two different things. Number one, prisoner A is like, I really, really do not want to end up in the top right box. That's the sucker's payout, okay? That's the one like we just described in the park where you're picking up your poop but nobody else does. That's called the sucker's payout, okay? It's the worst outcome imaginable. Or prisoner A is motivated perhaps not just by avoiding the top right box, the sucker's payout, but perhaps he's motivated by chasing the bottom left box. Because in the bottom left box where he confesses and his buddy doesn't, he gets away scot-free. Okay? So he's either trying to avoid the top right or trying to get the bottom left. Either way, I mean, if you take your brain and flip it around, prisoner B's story is exactly the same, right? It's the same story for both people. And what's always going to happen is they're both going to confess and they're both going to get 5 years in jail. Done! They could have gotten 1 year in jail if they worked together. And so this is the nature of a zero-sum game. Okay? By working together, everybody can win, or in this case, have less jail time, right? So both people think of it as a competitive situation, and it's not exactly a competitive situation. So both parties pursuing their own selfish best interests create an outcome nobody wants. Now, as I had said earlier, this all came out of the work of the Rand Corporation and the Cold War. So if you substitute prisoner A and prisoner B with the United States and the Soviet Union, and if you change confesses, don't confesses to builds more nuclear weapons, don't build more nuclear weapons, okay? And you could make the same game, and you could say, okay, how can you make people, obviously the best outcome for the entire world is nobody makes more nuclear weapons, and everybody sees that. But everybody's either pursuing the best possible outcome, we, the United States, make nuclear weapons, and them suckers in the Soviet Union do not, or they're afraid of the suckers' payout. We stop making nuclear weapons, but they continue to do so secretly or something. Then they have all of the bombs, and they have control of us. And so both parties pursuing their own selfish best interest create a situation where they built, at the height of the Cold War, there were so many nuclear, I can't even remember when I was a kid growing up, this number, it was like the debt clock or something, this number, the number of times that the world can be blown up with the bombs that are on it, and it was like 27,000 or so. It was out of control. Do you really need to be able to blow up the entire world more than one time? Pfft, pathetic. So, in some of my research, I play this kind of a game with participants, and I play for points. I mean, it's part of my dissertation, and it's kind of hard to describe here. This, I will admit, is a downfall of this online class here, because in the classroom, I actually have the apparatus and sit down and we play it together, and you can see it, and it's so much simpler. But suffice it to say, it's a game with points. And it's a game just like with the Prisoner's Dilemma, or with this silly prison time, or with the nuclear weapons. It's a game where it is a non-zero-sum game, but the players of the game are pursuing their own selfish best interest as though it's a zero-sum game that must have winners and losers. And in the end, everybody ends up losing and getting the least amount imaginable, the least amount possible. It's really interesting stuff. Whatever. I don't want to get into this. This is beyond, as I said, because this is a downfall of an online. I will admit. For most things, I'm happy with the online, but this one, not so much. But suffice it to say, I did some work and discovered that the nature of self-control and the nature of social cooperation are inherently the same thing. Maybe for some of you this will make sense. If you think about yourself as existing in multiple points in time, yourself today and yourself tomorrow, so your present self and your future self. And so we can talk about a game of social cooperation where if your present self does good things, then your future self benefits. Just like if you pick up your dog poop in the park, then the collective of everybody else benefits. If your present self, doesn't smoke, your future self benefits from the increased health that you get. In fact, not just your tomorrow self, but the day after self and the day after that self. So we find that this concept of self-control is social cooperation, if we consider yourself as existing in multiple points in time. And it sounds silly, but we in fact talked about it earlier. I think we did this earlier, talking about a present self and a future self. Remember, we said that we can't actually predict ourselves in ways, people that say, oh, I'm 100% positive I'll vote in this next election, and they vote at a rate of 85%, So clearly we don't have access to our future self. Our future self is a bit of a mystery. Hopefully less mysterious than the behavior of other individuals, but still, the behavior of our future self is a mystery and therefore subject to this type of a game. Alright, so Prisoner's Dilemma, like I said, it's an interesting game where if people work together, they get more. Tragedy of the Commons is a little bit different. The Commons is any shared resource. It can include air, water, energy source, like oil, food supplies, all kinds of things. But what happens is some individuals consume more than their fair share. Okay? Let's say the classic. This comes out of sheep grazing. Okay? The Commons was making reference to, this is Garrett Hardin's work, it was making reference to the common grazing ground in Scottish villages. In these villages, there's a commons in the middle of this town where everybody can put their sheep together. Everybody can graze their animals. But here's the deal. They have to have rules on the commons. It's like, okay, sheep eat grass, yes, and grass grows at a certain rate, yes. Now, what you want to do in an ideal world is never have more sheep than that is to say, you never have sheep that eat grass faster than grass grows, if that makes sense. So, we would call that the carrying capacity of the land, right? The carrying capacity is would be the number of animals that can live on a land, and the land produces food at the rate that those animals consume that food, something like that. And so what happens is they have these commons. Well, how about I just bring it up to the fishing? That's a better example. It's a much better example. It started with the. You'll see it's the same story. So this is a true one up in Newfoundland. Up in Newfoundland, the main economy is driven by fishing. Okay, they have wonderful fishing. The Grand Banks of Newfoundland. If anybody's heard of this area where the fish are just crazy big. And here's a problem though. Okay, just like the carrying capacity of the grazing ground, the number of new fish being born every day is a certain rate, and as long as the number of fish you take out of the ocean is less than the number of new fish being born, life is good. But as soon as the number of fish being pulled from the ocean is in fact larger than the number of baby fish being produced, you start to have population declines. So what happens, well, let's keep it simple. Let's pretend there was 100 Fisher Price people, 100 Fisher people in Newfoundland. And they made a pact together that said each one of us can take 1,000 pounds of fish per day. Okay, so 100 guys, 1,000 pounds of fish. What is that? I guess that's 100,000 pounds of fish a day. And we've decided that that is a sustainable rate. You know, if we pull out 100,000 pounds of fish per day, then the baby fish are born at such a rate that they replace those fish. Sweet! So now here comes Fisherman John. And John says, okay, if I pull 1,000 pounds of fish, here's the deal. That'll pay for my mortgage. That'll pay for my boat. That'll pay for my crew. That'll pay for my, my nets and whatever else, okay? It'll give me a little income, too. Don't get me wrong. I'll be able to buy my groceries. But my wife has been bugging me for a new ring. She thinks that her wedding ring sucked. She wants a big ring. I don't know how I'm going to do that, because at 1,000 pounds of fish, I can barely make it from day to day. You know what? Listen, if I grab 1,100 pounds, 1,100, that's it. 1,100 pounds of fish. That extra 100 pounds, man, I could just bank that, and within 3 weeks, or within a month, I can buy my wife that ring she wants, all right? As long as I just bank it, I'm set. And so Fisher John has this thing going, who's going to notice? There's 100,000 pounds of fish coming out every single day. Now there's 100,000 100 pounds, right? It's like, what's going to matter? That's not going to matter. But guess what Fisher Joe is thinking? Pretty much the same thing, except his wife wants a new mixer. KitchenAid mixer, and he's thinking the same thing. Man, my 1,000 pounds just barely pays my mortgage and pays for my boat and pays for the fuel and pays for my crew. I don't have spare money. But wait, if I just take 1,100 pounds, that extra 100, I could just bank that, couldn't I? And so Fisher Joe thinks the exact same thing as Fisher John. What's 100 pounds mean? Well, it doesn't matter. And every single one of those Fisher dudes is thinking the exact same thing. And pretty soon, your 100,000 pounds of fish is 120,000 pounds of fish, which is beyond the carrying capacity, which is beyond the sustainable rate of the ocean. And that's exactly what happened up in Newfoundland. And so what happened was they killed the fishing water. It died. They went through an entire generation where they had to just wait for the fish to come back, and they had nothing. They had nothing to sustain them. They had an entire generation of poverty as a result of this. It was an ugly scenario. Okay? And so you get it, by the way. The commons could refer to anything that we share in common. The problem is everybody it's again a social trap. Everybody pursuing their own selfish best interest creates a situation that is bad for everybody. Okay? And again, the commons, as we said, could be grazing ground with a fish, but the commons could also be something such as recycling. Because, of course, who wants to have landfills that are overflowing with trash? If we just recycle, but it takes effort, doesn't it? And people don't want to put that effort in. And so we take advantage of the commons and we use more than our fair share. How can we resolve some of these dilemmas? Some of these are great. Regulation. As I said, the Newfoundland people had some regulation in place, but they cheated their regulation. Regulation is absolutely critical. Let's say, for example, that's why there's a speed limit on the highway, because everybody pursuing their own selfish best interest, if you just let them take advantage of it, this is a tragedy of the commons right here. Everybody would speed as fast as they could just to get to their place. I was like, sorry for you, sucker, okay? So we have to regulate it so people don't get selfish. We put a speed limit. In small places, social dilemmas are easier to overcome, and that's not a surprise, because we know that in small places, such as small towns, anonymity goes down. And when anonymity goes down, all negative behavior goes down. Remember that? Communication, as I already said, in the classic Prisoner's Dilemma game, The key is prisoner A and prisoner B are not allowed to talk to each other. If prisoner A and prisoner B do in fact talk to each other, well then all bets are off about the outcome, okay? And finally, changing the payoffs. This is a really neat example with the carpooling lane. Nobody wants to carpool, right? It sucks, right? You gotta drive to somebody's house and you gotta wait for them to get out of the door. And of course, they said they were gonna be ready at 7:15, but they won't be. It'll be 7:30 when they actually walk out the door. You're waiting there 15 minutes, and then they finally get in your car, and then they spill their coffee in your car, and they smell bad because they didn't take a shower. And who wants to carpool? Right? Nobody wants to carpool. So what the government does is they change the payoffs for carpooling, okay? They give carpooling a little added bonus. If you carpool, then you can use the HOV lane, the high occupancy vehicle lane, and speed up your commute, okay? And so that's why HOV lanes were created, was to increase the desirability of carpooling, because carpooling is, in fact, in everybody's best interest. What creates conflicts? Competition. Oh yeah, we've talked about this. Competition also creates, remember, competition creates prejudice too. Remember that hatred comes out of competition. Well, here we go. Here was a classic study done by Muzaffar Sharif, and Sharif, the same dude that did the autokinetic phenomenon in the social norms in the lab. He takes two groups of boys, he puts them on, they're going into a summer camp. And they literally, he just does this, As they get off the bus, all right, he's just the first kid off, he goes, "You're an eagle. You're a rattler. You're an eagle. You're a rattler." It's just, as they walked off the bus, he assigned them to these groups. It was totally random to assign them. And they were set up to like each other. They had, they worked together, they ate together, they did games together. And then later on, he introduced competition, the Eagles versus the Rattlers. And very, very quickly, as soon as they were put into competition, horrendous conflict resulted. These boys started to, they would raid each other. Here's, in fact, they're raiding each other's cabins. They're stealing each other's shoes. They're those stupid eagles, they smell bad, and you don't even know what they had for breakfast, and they had food fights. I mean, it was really bad. Well, we're going to come back to this story later. It was really a neat experiment. We're going to come back to this later when we talk about resolving conflict. What else creates conflicts? These should not be a surprise to you. We've seen this before, okay? Equity is achieved if I perceive that my outcomes over my inputs is equal to your outcomes over your inputs. Remember, we've seen this exact idea before, that equity. Remember, equity is one of the components of marriage, right? And it's like, oh, it's all about love. No, it's a social game, an economic game here, buddy. All relationships are an economic game, and I will feel a conflict if what I put in and what I take out does not equal what you put in and you take out. Okay? And again, though, these are subjective. I might value some special skill you have in some unique way, which makes me, I don't know. I mean, something. I don't know. It's funky. Conflict is they perceived, blah, 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 blah. Misperception, yeah, whatever, boring. Mirror image perceptions, reciprocal views of each other, often held by parties in conflict. They each may view itself as moral and peace-loving, and the other as evil and aggressive. Do I really need to say Democrats and Republicans? Yeah. Do I really need to say, Iran versus America in their current head-to-head nonsense? I mean, come on. We see each other, and they view us as evil, and we view them as evil, and it's just crazy. This, though, it was interesting. I'll tell you that this is. I remember in the 1980s there was this song by Sting. Sting, the lead singer of the Police. He had recently broken off from the Police and started his solo career. And he put out a song. It hit the American Top 40 for a while, not very long, but it was an interesting song. It was called "The Russians Love Their Children Too," and the point of this song, obviously, was to let us see that we're demonizing them. You know, we're seeing them as some kind of a faceless enemy, as some kind of a demon or some kind of an enemy. But he was like, you know what? Look, they love their kids too. And if you could take that simple idea and actually internalize it, you'd be like, wait a minute, I love my children, and I'm human. Maybe we're actually alike. Okay. All right, whatever. Now I want to move into something I pulled right off the internet. You know, this is all cutesy, with all kinds of cartoony things. So sit back and enjoy. When we get into arguments with people, the problem won't be sorted until both parties feel that they have been treated fairly. Equity theory, right? Equity. In order to make things fair, all parties have to understand each other. That's interesting. They have to avoid making things worse. Oh yeah, anybody ever been in a marriage? I'll tell you about that one. They have to work together. Ooh, we're going to talk about cooperating with each other and find a solution to their conflict. Because remember, most conflict is a perceived, a perception that what we want and what we need don't match. First, we have to try to understand it by putting ourselves in the other person's shoes. Easier said than done, right? Whipping out a couple of pictures of shoes doesn't really do that. Each person must be allowed to say how they feel without being interrupted. Ooh, my. Each person must listen carefully to what the other has to say. Oh, yeah. This sounds like Marriage 101. Everyone must make sure they don't make the situation worse. So, no put-downs, no bringing out secrets, no screaming, no shouting, no fighting, no kicking, no pushing. This isn't kindergarten. Each person must be determined to work together with the other. That means they have to take turns, speak quietly but firmly, be active listeners, talk about how you feel without blaming anyone. I could add to that, but I choose not to. Now, find a solution by working together. All right, whatever. So here's our story. Oh, we know all parties must stay and stick to what they've decided. So here's our prepared. Yeah, okay. Here's our story. The short tale of a lemon. Okay. Now, once there were two women who both wanted a lemon. However, as luck would have it, there was only one lemon left in the shop. Oh, man. Without discussion, they both agreed to take half. Chop. One woman took her half lemon home and squeezed it to make a lemon juice. The juice barely covered the bottom of the glass. Oh! The other grated the rind to make a lemon-flavored cake. It really wasn't as good as she wanted because she only had a half a lemon. The juice squirted all over the house. Think about it. If they had taken the time to talk to each other, they both would have realized what the other one wanted. And then one person could have had the whole juice and the other one could have had the whole rind. And they both would have had what they wanted. Talking can often lead to solutions which benefit everyone. Got it. No, this isn't, though this is a silly sounding little parable or something. This is key. I'm going back to what I said at the beginning. The key to all of this is that the world is not always run on zero-sum games. In fact, most of the time, especially in social situations, the world is not zero-sum. Okay? And so what we find is that if you approach a non-zero-sum game as though it's a zero-sum game, you're setting it up for everyone to lose. Okay, so now, the 4 C's of peacemaking. 4 C's. Contact. I like it. If you don't contact somebody, you'll never get to know them, and if you don't know them, they're not human. That's how it works. The Russians love their children too, but we don't talk to them. Okay? Cooperation. Okay, cooperation, working together, communicating with each other, and conciliating, accepting it. But it's not just contact, it has to be equal status contact. Here was an interesting scenario. This was after desegregation in South Africa. And here is a satellite image of a beach. And lo and behold, what we see is that, by the way, after desegregation, racial attitudes in South Africa really didn't get any better. Here's what happened. Here's a desegregated beach. But we find that at this desegregated beach, they segregated themselves anyway. It's hard to see, but we see the whites, the blacks, and the Indians, and they have completely isolated themselves from each other, even though it's a desegregated beach. Whatever. This one's better. Cooperation. I like this. So going back to Muzaffar Sharif's experiment with the rattlers and the eagles. So the rattlers and the eagles, they hated each other. Like I said, they were food fights, and those stupid rattlers, they smell like a skunk, and, you know, something like that. And so here's what he did. Muzaffar Sharif set up some scenarios where the only way to solve the problems involved was if they all worked together. So one day they're driving along and the bus breaks down. Oh shit, the bus is broken. We're gonna have to push the bus. Well, how are we gonna do that? Well, everybody has to work together to push the bus. Okay? If we don't work together, we'll never get this thing going and we'll never get back home. And he set up another one with the camp water supply got disrupted. And so the only way that they could get enough water to do what needed to be done was a bucket brigade. Okay, I think he even put up a little fire or some nonsense like that. And the only way to get the fire out was if all the boys cooperated with each other and worked together. And so what happened was that we find, I mean, on the graph on the left here, the amount of how much hatred they had towards each other before and after having superordinate goals. I like this superordinate goals. There's one for you. You guys can't appreciate the top left, but it's a beautiful thing. The top left there is up in Wisconsin, you get snowed, so much snow, and then the snowplow comes to plow the street, and what it does is it pushes all the snow up against the side of your car, and so your car gets completely plowed under and is totally stuck in the snow, and the only way you can get your car out is by pushing it, right? And you can't push your car and drive your car at the same time, so you see that this act up in the top left corner involves at least 3 people. With the assumption that the 2 guys that are helping push now will in fact receive help later on. So when there's a common external threat, it builds cohesiveness. We all know that after 9/11 how much patriotism America was all about. Or group identities lead to peace. Take a look right here in schools that require uniforms. There's far fewer things such as gang fights and stuff in those schools because there's a common identity with all of the kids wearing the uniforms. And likewise, cooperation is much more likely if players are allowed to talk to each other. And it's really interesting. I, in fact, found in my dissertation that it's not, I mean, it's talking to each other, but what the talking does is allows for the buildup of trust. Trust is the issue. And so, as I said, even a self-control game is a game of social cooperation between your present self and your future self. Because I'll tell you what, talk about that sucker's payout. The ultimate sucker's payout is if your present self decides, I am going to stop smoking and go through it. I'm going to suffer, and I'm going to go through withdrawal and everything else, and then your future self goes, sucker, and starts smoking again. All right? So your present self doesn't always necessarily trust your future self. You can imagine such a scenario. So in the same way, we fail at social cooperation if we don't trust the other people are going to do their job. We fail at self-control if we don't trust that we ourselves are going to be a good person. Mediation and bargaining, yeah. Mediation is an attempt by a neutral third party to resolve a conflict by facilitating communication and offering suggestions. Mediation is a newer field. It is a hugely growing field. It is clearly an application of psychology that is understated. It is one that is huge growth. I mean, the growth rate in mediation is 20% a year or something. I mean, the job market is just shooting through the roof, and the salaries for mediation is just phenomenal. So it's definitely a good application of psych. Arbitration. You resolve a conflict by going to a neutral third party who studies both sides and imposes a settlement. My kids come to me all the time with that one. It's my job to arbitrate it. It makes me think of the People's Court with Judge Joe Wapner. And if I remember the People's Court and Joe Wapner, they, and I believe they, at the very beginning of the People's Court, they always started with, both sides in this disagreement have agreed to come here and allow Judge Wapner to settle their dispute, or something like that. All right, it was set up as though it was a court of law, but there was nothing legal about it. It was literally the act of arbitration. We agreed to let this third person do it. By going to arbitration, hopefully we can get an integrative agreement, like we had talked about with the lemon. An integrative agreement is an agreement where everybody wins, because you find that it's not a zero-sum game, that our incompatibility is only a perceived incompatibility, that we find that we actually have more in common. And then this one is kind of whatever. I don't really know this one that much. Okay, so I'm stopping already. I'm only at 46 minutes. Believe it or not, the long-winded professor has decided to say the end.